Now that we have introduced the strategy execution gap, let's take a look at the visualization of it to get a better understanding of the direction flow and the components. So you can see here at the top we have our strategy illustration. We have executives at the top and employees at the bottom, and if you notice there's a one-way unilateral arrow showing the flow of information, reflecting how strategy is usually disseminated within an organization. Typically executives design the strategy and then hope or plan for it to succeed. But with all these different question marks in the middle between strategy and execution, the people who plan, the people who do, there's so much that can and will continue to derail plans, increase budgets, to lengthening out target due dates. It's not good. So if we either ignore this or hope that the strategy execution gap won't get our next big strategy and that it's going to go through smoothly, it's a delusion. So we have to understand how today looks, right? So here it is. There's one flow direction, there's executives, there's employees, there's strategy, there's execution. So we've talked before about how executives sometimes have a mentality of, here, we designed the strategy, we paid for all the consultants, we've done the studies, we put this beautiful, perfect strategy together, now just figure it out, everybody. And it doesn't work that way. People usually don't know there is a strategy, they're looking around, they don't see it, no one's telling them anything, and then there's a bunch of other lookouts that strategy falls into and it goes off rail. So what we're going to do next is talk about what the complete strategy execution framework looks like to help close this gap. Based on my research, compiling my book, and reading every other book in existence on strategy and strategy execution, this is the framework that I've come up with. And it's also based on my own experience and my knowledge working in organizations in the strategy execution gap over 10 years. So here it is. At the top, we still have strategy, and in the bottom is execution. But within this gap, we understand what the different components are that we have to understand and get right, or else we'll be derailed. So following strategy is planning. It comes focus, decentralization, ownership and accountability, communication, culture, leadership, experience, skills, professionalism, continuous improvement mindset. Finally, if you get all of that right, you get execution. And there's two more pieces here I'm not sure you've noticed yet. If you look at the flow of information from before is one direction from executives to workers, strategy to execution. Now it's a bi-directional flow. The people who do the work are willing and able and encouraged to share information across the organization when they see things aren't right, and they want to become informed. And now we're sharing that information, and it's becoming a lot easier for everyone to understand what's going on in the organization, how plans are put together, and then how the progress is going. You know, if something gets sidetracked, the organization is much more likely to discuss that and get it back on track rather than ignoring it or hope it gets better by itself. And then the additional piece to this framework on the right hand side is the piece that says who will do what and by when. We had briefly touched on this earlier, but who will do what and by when is a very smart way to assign responsibility to others and for them to take ownership of targets and goals and the outcomes that we want to see. If you have a strategy and you eventually break it down into plans and milestones, you need to assign who will have ownership of each piece. If you put a name, who, you describe what they have to do, and you describe when it has to happen, that person will then be able to understand their expectations, and then they can use in their own experience to fill in the how. Rather than micromanaging each step, the executives trust the people to carry out the plan and to work amongst each other collaboratively to get it to come to fruition. And then if there are delays in the timeline, that could be communicated back and forth, both directions, and then we can get things fixed, and then we can learn. If people have their name on projects, they're not going to forget about them. It's not going to be something they eventually get to. It's going to be a priority. And that's the importance of having this framework with these 13 components and assigning who will do what and by when with a bi-directional flow of information. The only portion that we haven't covered so far is the why. And the why is important, but that is not going to be covered here. That will be covered in a later section and relate to things more like culture and accountability and ownership. So someone will understand why they would want to work on the strategy for the organization and to do their best, and that has to be a piece, but that just won't be a piece we cover now. And like I just said, the how is never dictated. You trust people to become experts in their area of mastery, and you let them grow and face these challenges and learn together. And by doing this, you have the best path possible to close a strategy execution gap. When communicating the new strategy execution framework and adapting it into your organization, you want to cover 3 points with your people and with your employees and with your leadership teams. The first is that strategy execution is a discipline and it requires a learning framework. People need to understand what skills and abilities they need to help the organization and improve their effectiveness in it. So the organization needs to make learning, resources and accessibility a lot more open for people to sign up for and to get the training they need. And people should also be encouraged to learn on their own, right? You don't just want someone learning everything at work. You want people to understand, by working here, I will have a growth mindset. So that's key. And then you can keep and attract the best people who are curious about work and want to continue to learn and get better. The second piece is learned expertise. By having in-house experts or masters of knowledge in their domains, people will be able to feel empowered and valued within the organizations. Too often, organizations bring in outsiders to handle some of the trickier work, but if you trust people and you give them these opportunities, they'll rise to the challenge and help the organization strengthen its core competencies and get better at closing that strategy execution gap. The third piece is practice. Every organization has a strategy they want to implement over the course of several years, but people can't just wait around for the big strategy to become knowledgeable or experienced in strategy execution. So what you want to do is find ways to help people get smaller projects that help them build the confidence and skills over time. You want to ensure that people are growing and being challenged and are working in different roles so that when the big challenge comes, they're ready to face it and they don't need to start from scratch.